Hey everyone. Nice, this works. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Indeed, I'm Eva, data scientist at the City of Amsterdam. This person right next to me on the picture is Laurens. He's my colleague, who's very sadly sitting right in front of me in the audience because before the end of this talk, he will need to rush to the hospital for maybe another ankle surgery. So let's wish him all good luck. And today I will share on my own what we do together. We work for the City of Amsterdam, a city of close to 1 million people by now, a city with, I think we're the biggest employer in the city. More than 20,000 civil servants work there, and we get like million and million of tourists. What do? We do services for citizens, so anything from issuing documents, permits, etc. We handle public space, managing trees and benches and trash and everything that's happening, infrastructure, maintenance of roads, bike paths. So you can imagine there's so much happening that we do need AI. We do need any automation and like making processes more efficient so that things run smoothly. I think those of you that have been here in the previous years have probably already seen things related to garbage collection and fraud detection and things like that from my colleagues. But for the past 2 years, life has been all about language models, obviously. Some of the larger projects going on at the moment are, of course, we have our internal Chat Amsterdam. That's like a language model application that civil servants can use in a secure environment so that they can support their own processes. And while we have a lot of regulations for do not use it with sensitive data, do not use it for policy making, etc., you all know that these days everybody uses this stuff for brainstorming anything related to their work. So implicitly, anything that comes out of large language models would end up in policy, in processes, and all over the city. So it's going to impact everyone sooner or later. Another example are the city archives. So in the past 1 or 2 years, we've done a whole bunch of projects with them. One, for example, for researching, can we let citizens talk to large collections of publicly available documents, both like information from the city council and like paperwork documents, but also the city archives themselves, so historical documents. For those applications, especially the historical ones, it's very important that language models well understand our culture and background and history, and in communicating it to people, they still preserve all flavors. We also have use cases related to legal content, for example, summarizing large legal cases to improve the efficiency of handling different objections in the city and all sorts of legal process. So it's a lot of huge, very diverse projects, and for each one of them, always the question comes, what language model do we actually want to use? What is legally allowed, what is ethically desirable, but what is also technically possible in a certain use case. And that's how the project that we work on came to be. What we want to do with Laurens is to create an overview of large language models together with their performance, environmental impact, and alignment with city values to actually help our colleagues, and hopefully not only our own colleagues, but like all of Dutch government and maybe even you guys and everybody around to adopt these models responsibly. OK, so we're going to create an overview of models, but what do we need to know? What does everybody need to know to make a choice about language models to be used? To do this, we first put together advice council. What is a good translation? Our advice council, because that's what we do in the municipality. We always start with putting 20 people in a meeting, talk for an hour or two. We asked our advisors, that was sustainability experts, privacy experts, people from the business, etc. What do you guys need to know? What is important to know about models? And what you see here is on this axis is like the importance for the experts. So sustainability, factuality of models, inclusion was the single most voted topic from them. And on the other axis, you see the feasibility as judged by the technical team, because not everything is equally easy to measure when it comes to large language models. Based on that input, we prioritized a few topics: sustainability, some factual information about like source data and costs of models, factuality and honesty, and inclusion, because we thought if it's so hard, we're not going to just leave it be, but let's pick it up as early as possible. And I'm actually glad we did, because it appeared to be more tangible. So in this talk, I'm also going to walk you a little bit through everything we've done so far about these aspects. Next thing we did was to actually understand who are we doing this overview for. So I braced myself as a little user researcher and spoke to 20-ish people from the organization, very diverse ones. What appeared was that in large organizations like ours, there is zero consensus about who has the responsibility to select a language model for a specific use case. So if you ask data scientists, they say, well, but that's not like choosing a classifier, so I can give some input, but I don't want to have the responsibility to make the full choice. Product owners and managers, they say, well, we would like to help. We can also get a requirement, but we don't understand all the technical details, so somebody else should do it. Some people say a centralized advice should be given for the whole organization, and some say it's even a political advice. So this is something that also gets commonly discussed in the city council between like different committees and deputy mayors, because it touches on topics like digital autonomy and sustainability. So everybody wants to kind of have a say in these huge choices. So what we knew was user group is literally everybody in the organization, and this overview must be as simple and non-technical and intuitive as possible for everybody to use. Another big question for me was, but there's not so much done for Dutch specifically, so there's a lot of research and leaderboards in the world for English. There's some small work for Dutch as well. Shout out to the Euroeval people, used to be Scandeval, for example. So I was wondering, why do we not extend on their work and just integrate benchmarks there? It appeared that people find these overviews super technical, super unintuitive. They see benchmarks there, like Scala NL and MMLU and this and that. They have no clue what is behind this benchmark, what does it measure, how relevant is it for my use case. And even the technical people say, I see a score, it seems to go from 0 to 100, the more seems to be the better, but I don't really know what does like a 1-point difference mean really in terms of performance on a real use case. A bit like that. So we decided to build something from scratch. And I think without further ado, this is a bit what we've built, work in progress. What you see is left side, I think, super clear existing models, as technical as possible, concrete versions of models, because even within the same family of models, they do not perform at all equally well, depending on the size and small variations. Second column that you see is information about the provider. We had a huge discussion about the flags that you see in front of the providers. I had a lot of, it was a whole ethical dilemma. Should this even be there? Does it mean something whether a model came from here or there? It appeared that actually from a legal perspective, it matters. Legal people see the country of the provider as the place where local legislation was respected in the training and creation of the model. So that means something for them for, like, for example, was GDPR respected in collecting data and training the model? But it's also the country where juridical disputes will be resolved in case of conflict. Sorry about the noise. I hope you still hear me. Then we see some practical information about licensing, training data, etc. And your right part of the table, this is where it gets interesting. So first off are the costs and energy use. How we checked that was by integrating code carbon in all of our benchmark runs. So basically, we run a whole bunch of benchmarks for different aspects, like factuality, inclusion, whatever. In the running of the benchmarks, we always have code carbon on the back, measuring the energy consumption during inference of the large language models, only the inference. And at the end, we have an average for like what's the average use for 1,000 prompts. I highly recommend Code Carbon because it not only gives you an idea at what environmental price certain performance comes, but for me it was also very handy for troubleshooting things and debugging because I could very easily see that, oh wait, Quen, for example, is taking super long, there's something going badly wrong there, oh, there's this thinking mode that I want to turn off or something. So it was also for debugging magical. And that data we also used for estimating costs. So for API models, it's easy, you pay per token, you can make some calculations, and for the self-hosted models, we use the code carbon logs for duration of runs, and we know the pricing of GPUs that we use, etc., to actually calculate costs. One notable thing, the overview currently by default is sorted by energy use. And what you see on the bottom is this little disclaimer. I don't think it's very readable. It basically says that for closed source models, such as GPT, we cannot possibly estimate energy consumption. This is something that there's nothing disclosed out there in the world about the actual energy consumption, let alone something comparable to running a model yourself and knowing exactly what you've produced. So we recommend that people use different models if they do care about environmental impact. Then moving to the next column, the bias column. At first, people kept talking about inclusion. We dived a lot into, but what do they actually mean with inclusion? What does it really mean for anybody to be inclusive? At the end, we found a few existing benchmarks. They were all for Dutch. They all contain instances, for example, like scenarios. Would you hire this Dutch, Moroccan, Turkish, etc. person? So it's a template where you vary country of origin, and you prompt the model, would you hire this person given that they have the exact same competences? You prompt with each nationality, and you measure difference in treatment. Essentially, what we want from language model is that if they hire 50 times nationality X, they also hire 50 times nationality Y. Similar thing for age, gender, nationality, religion, etc. There's a few attributes. The other flavor is these questions. The Dutch barbecue, for example, there are questions like, people were in the room, one person had certain, say, disorder, and the rest not. Something happened, who reacted aggressively? And then you basically check whether the model will dive into assumptions and stereotypes and respond with the stereotypical group, or say, this is an ambiguous situation, I cannot possibly know. What was very hard was how do we then present all of this to a single score. At the moment, we've chosen to focus on individual aspects and show these differences in treatment per aspect separately. We have 4 aspects. We want to add more in the future, and we are even thinking of creating our own inclusive city benchmark, because none of the benchmarks covers all 16 sensitive attributes that the municipality cares about. Yeah, this is the column with the 4 emojis that you see. One thing that's maybe notable how hard all of this was the Mistral, where's the Mistral scores? The little globe, the second icon, is very high red, meaning it has very strong bias when it comes to country of origin. It happens for two reasons when I inspected the data. First, because I think there's been a lot of mitigation in the training cycles. So currently, if you ask, would you hire this person? It actually says, I would hire them because of this, but I would not hire them because of that, which screws the post-processing of the responses and the decisions of, did you hire this person or not? And in the automatic pipeline, it actually screws all the results, just because of this over-mitigating possible biases in the training. And it happens actually with a lot of the models that, because of mitigation, they overcompensate and often choose for the counter-stereotypical groups, which is, again, a bias on its own, but it's all these decisions. What do we want from models? How do we visualize it? How do we communicate what kind of bias it is so that people can select for different use cases? Do they want that model or not? And then moving to the right, there's the factuality and honesty. At first, people were only talking about factuality. When we kept digging with the experts into what they actually mean, it quickly appeared that they mean two separate things. So one was, when I ask a question, I want the answer to be correct. They mostly mean factuality, so answering correctly objective, factual, known questions. That's like the evergreen knowledge, things that will never change, who was the first president of a country, whether the Earth is round, etc. It's not so much about context-dependent knowledge, so it's not about traditions, about religions, about beliefs, and subjective things. We already had a few benchmarks implemented at that point, so we put them under this aspect, for whoever knows them, ARC, MMLU, and Truthful QA. The problem with most factuality benchmarks is that they're actually mixed with reasoning, so it's not exactly what we want to measure, but for now, we saw that actually the performance correlates quite well between the pure factuality and the reasoning, so we've put it all together. And then it appeared that what people also often mention, and they say that's even more important, is, so on one hand, when I ask a question, I want the correct answer, but when you do not know the answer, be honest and tell me. So they want models to explicitly state their limitations, and when they don't know, cannot possibly know, cannot perform a request, do say so. We looked a lot around. There's also a few English benchmarks that try to measure honesty. Nothing was really suitable, so we thought, let's just create our own benchmark for that. Before we dive into how we did that, maybe a side note on what do we want from benchmarks. So we have this very sustainable mindset where we try to reuse existing Dutch benchmarks, because everything we do is directly in Dutch. If not possible, we try to translate English benchmarks, but this is very, very hard for many benchmarks. For example, in terms of inclusion, find that you translate content, but stereotypes don't transfer well between countries. So at the end, you're not really measuring what you want to measure. So we would like to steer away from that. Normally, people want huge benchmarks. We want very small benchmarks. We actually use, for some of our experiments, the so-called tiny benchmarks. They're basically famous benchmarks reduced to 100 very carefully curated examples that approximate performance on the full data set at the end. And that's a bit the mindset that we have, like 100, 500 prompts can be more than enough to test something. We don't have to kill a whole forest just to benchmark performance. And there were already a few talks earlier about LLM as a judge. We do have the very strict agreement that whenever we do use LLM as a judge, we always keep the humans and the experts in the loop. So I think the guys from 2 talks ago were explaining this whole setup with have also people manually perform the task and then check performance with the judges. We always do that. And we never use LLMs as a judge for sensitive tasks. So things like inclusion, it's not out of question that we would rely on automated evaluation. So for the honesty benchmark, what we did was to sit down and understand what are the different scenarios, when exactly do we want a model to be honest, what does it mean to be honest. From that, we came up with 5 categories, so I'm not sure if this is very readable. Left side categories, for example, when a model does not have latest information. Questions like, what was discussed in the last city council meeting, or what was the score of a soccer game from last night. No model ever can possibly know. So in those cases, we want the models to explicitly say, I do not have access to sources, I do not have access to external information. Last thing I know is this and that, maybe. Feel free to elaborate, but do say, I do not have access. Prompts when the information provided by the user is wrong or incomplete. One that I find extremely important is when an expert opinion is required. So in society, we do have, for certain things, like being a doctor, being a lawyer, we have certification, we have requirements for the skills and knowledge of people, and they're experts for a reason. And it's not really realistic to expect that models can know their work. So whenever there could be legal or health or financial consequences from the responsible model, I think they should explicitly, honestly say, I am not an expert, so this is my non-expert opinion here. Use it with caution. And multimodality. In our Chat Amsterdam pilot, for example, we see that lots of colleagues request make a video campaign for this, design a poster for that, make an Excel sheet with something. But the text generation model cannot possibly generate any other modalities. And in those cases, most LLMs are a bit creative with, there's a script for your video. But we do want them to be honest, right? And say, this is something I cannot do. So that's the 5 categories. The evaluation, basically we want to evaluate that the models explicitly state their limitation, but there's too many ways to phrase that, to say, I don't know, I cannot know, etc. So because of that, we did decide this is a good moment to test using LLMs as a judge. And indeed, we had like 10, 15 judges, I believe, that we tested. We did manual evaluation with 2 annotators, which was also super useful because in the manual annotation, we also resolved any differences in opinions about what is this category actually about and what is expected, when is a model honest and when not. So we could actually tweak all definitions and prompts very well. And then we compared the judgments with ours. To not go into super much details, we looked into inter-annotator agreement, so basically make sure that the individual judgments of the models correlate with ours. But mathematically, if you look into it, that can advantage or disadvantage certain models as a whole. So we also looked into the correlation of the final ranking. So if I've had the feeling in my judgments that model X was best, I also expect my judge to find them best, even if they're were all more pessimistic and strict or overall more positive. So I want the final ranking of models to be preserved the same. And we figured out that none of these judges on their own is good enough. So this is also the numbers that we see in literature. You get agreements in the, I think it was like 60 to 80% or so, which is, at the end of the day, if you try to compare models, what does that even mean? So we thought this is not really acceptable, and we got way better results with putting together 3 judges. And these 3 judges, we also chose for the smallest good-performing ones possible, so that also the evaluation is not super heavy and environmentally impactful. I thought I have the... Wait, we'll go back to the board here. How that looks now is if you see the last column, it's actually quite low scores. You don't see the full ranking. I think some GPTs are missing from the board. They have slightly better ranking, but what you see is no model performs better than 60%. We were thinking a lot, should we scale somehow the scores and what we visualize, but if it's not good, it's not good, right? And the biggest problems are, so latest information goes fine. Most models are fine with dealing with that, especially the larger parts of the family. Dealing with wrong or incomplete input, that's also somewhat fine. But multimodality, most of them, as I was saying, they try to go around with, let me tell you how to do it, let me tell you how to perform it, do a script, but none of them says, I cannot generate a video. And the expert, from the manual evaluation, if I'm not mistaken, there was one model that got 1 or 2 of the prompts fine. Everybody else kept going on advice for medication for children, drug policy, drug-related policy, financial stuff, legal advice. Everybody had like their own opinions, 0 disclaimers. So this was the most painful category, and we thought, we do think everybody deserves the bad scores on the board for now. What is next? Definitely not switch a slide. There. Not sure why this is not working. What we still want to do is to add also some performance-specific stuff related to Amsterdam use cases, summarization and simplification. We actually almost have everything implemented for simplification, but we have quite huge problems with the scores. I don't know if anybody has worked on simplification, but if you have ideas on how to evaluate it properly, please let me know. And for summarization, we do have some translated data sets, but we're not happy with the quality, so we are looking for really good quality, ideally longer document classification of Dutch texts. So also call to action. If anybody has good benchmarks, let us know. Retrieval augmented generation, of course, that's what everybody wants to do. As I already said, the inclusive city benchmark, so maybe expand to more aspects. And with the upcoming elections, something which I find super cool that we want to look into is also political bias. So as I was saying in the beginning, many people these days use models for policy making, not allowed, but implicitly it kind of happens. And there's already one really cool study by, I believe, TNO, where they let language models fill in the STEM visor, STEM compass, those tools that you can use before elections to check which parties your opinions correlate the most with. And they do already see that models lean in the left progressive corner of the world, which makes sense with all like data augmentation and bias mitigation techniques. So it makes sense, but we really want to understand what does that mean when people use it for, I don't know, housing policy or energy-related stuff. So what does that really mean? And something interesting, not very burning, experts said that it's not so crucial, but we do think it's interesting to know what do all of these models know about Dutch culture and Amsterdam in specific. So when we start using them more and more also in cultural use cases, we have a better idea for that. A bit like that. The overview is already publicly available, the last QR code. It is, however, work in progress, so we are manually verifying scores, adding more models, because the models are something outdated from, I think, half a year, 1 year ago, just to get the whole pipeline working. But as soon as we have a first version we are truly happy with, we'll also advertise it more widely on LinkedIn and everywhere. But for now, you can still look at it, and if you have any feedback, if you have benchmarks, if you want to talk to us about anything, please contact me or Laurens.